The church bells tolled, each chime a hammer against my heart. I stood at the altar, my hands trembling as I adjusted my tie, the weight of the moment crushing me. In hours, I'd be married to a man I loved, but not the one I'd lost. 3 years ago, I buried Caleb, or so I thought. The Marine Corps sent me a folded flag, a letter of condolence, and a void where my soul used to be. Caleb, my first love, my anchor, was gone, killed in action in a desert halfway across the world. I was 25, shattered, and alone in our small Virginia town. The grief was a living thing, clawing at me every night until I forced myself to move on. I met Ethan, kind and steady, who pieced me back together. Now, at 28, I was minutes from vowing forever to him. But as the organ played, a shadow moved in the back of the church, a ghost I never expected. My name is Lucas Harper, and this is the story of how my world unraveled. The morning of the wedding was crisp, autumn painting the Shenandoah Valley in hues of amber and crimson. I woke in our old farmhouse, the one Caleb and I had dreamed of fixing up. Ethan was already downstairs, humming as he brewed coffee, his calm presence a balm to my nerves. I loved Ethan, his quiet strength, his patience, the way he made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. But loving him didn't erase Caleb. It never would. I stood at the mirror, staring at my reflection. My blonde hair was neatly combed, my blue eyes bright but shadowed with something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe. For moving on. For letting Caleb's memory fade just enough to let someone else in. I slipped on my suit jacket, the one Ethan picked out, and tried to focus on the future. The church was small, its white steeple a beacon in our town of Willow Creek. Friends and family filled the pews, their smiles warm but expectant. Ethan stood beside me, his dark eyes steady, his hand brushing mine in a quiet promise. The preacher began, his voice a low hum, but my mind drifted. I saw Caleb's face, his crooked smile, his hazel eyes that always seemed to see right through me. I shook it off, focusing on Ethan's hand in mine. Then the doors creaked open. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I turned, and my heart stopped. There, in the doorway, stood Caleb. Alive. His Marine uniform was crisp, his dark hair shorter than I remembered. But those eyes, God, those eyes were unmistakable. He looked older, harder, like the world had carved pieces out of him. But he was real. Not a ghost. Not a dream. Lucas, he said, his voice rough, breaking the silence. Ethan's hand tightened on mine. The preacher faltered. Every eye in the church was on us, but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Caleb was dead. I'd grieved him. I'd built a life without him. And now he was here, walking toward me, each step a seismic shift in my reality. Caleb. My voice cracked, barely a whisper. He stopped a few feet away, his jaw tight, his eyes searching mine. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know about this. He gestured to the altar, to Ethan, to the life I'd made without him. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. Who are you? Caleb's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. I'm Caleb Monroe, Lucas's fiancé. The word hit like a grenade. Fiancé. The ring I'd worn for Caleb was long gone, tucked away in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Ethan's ring was on my finger now. I felt the room spin, the air too thick to breathe. You're supposed to be dead, I said, my voice louder now, raw with disbelief. They told me you were dead. Caleb's face tightened, pain flashing in his eyes. I was captured, held for 3 years. I got out 6 months ago, but I couldn't come back until now. I didn't know you'd moved on. Moved on. The word stung, like I'd betrayed him by surviving. Ethan's hand was still in mine, grounding me, but my heart was splitting in two. Caleb. Alive. Caleb. Here. After all this time. The preacher cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a moment. No, I said, surprising myself. I need to know. Now. Caleb nodded, his shoulders sagging slightly. Can we talk? Alone. Ethan's grip tightened, but he let go when I looked at him. His eyes were steady, trusting, but I saw the fear there too. I followed Caleb outside, the autumn air biting my skin as we stepped into the churchyard. The crowd's whispers faded behind us. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, my voice shaking. 3 years. Caleb. I thought you were gone. I couldn't, he said, his voice low. I was in a black site. Lucas. No contact. No way out. When I escaped, I was debriefed for months. They wouldn't let me reach you until I was cleared. I came as soon as I could. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the one I'd loved. He was leaner, his face lined with scars I didn't recognize. But his eyes, those were the same. The ones that had promised me forever before he deployed. Why now? I asked. Why today? I didn't know you were getting married, he said, his voice breaking. I tracked you down, came to the house, and a neighbor told me you were here. I couldn't let you, without knowing I'm alive. I wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse into his arms and pretend the last 3 years hadn't happened. But they had. And Ethan was waiting inside, the man who'd loved me through my grief, who'd given me a reason to live again. I can't do this, I said, stepping back. I can't choose right now. Caleb's face fell, but he nodded. I'm not asking you to. I just needed you to know I'm here. He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. Don't go. Not yet. He looked at me, and for a moment, we were 25 again, planning a life together. But the moment passed, and I was back in the present, torn between two men who held different pieces of my heart. The churchyard was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves underfoot. Caleb stood before me, a living ghost, his presence pulling at every thread of my carefully rebuilt life. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions: how he survived, what he endured, why he couldn't have sent a single word to let me know he was alive. But my throat was tight, and all I could do was stare. I thought about you every day, Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. In that cell, your face was the only thing that kept me going. My chest ached. I wanted to believe him, to fall back into the love we'd had. But the weight of Ethan's ring on my finger anchored me to the present. You don't get to do this, I said, my voice sharp. You don't get to walk back in and unravel everything. I'm not trying to, he said, stepping closer. I had to see you. Lucas. I had to know you were okay. Okay. I laughed, bitter and broken. I was destroyed when they told me you were dead. I didn't eat for weeks. I didn't sleep. I was a shell until Ethan. I stopped, the name catching in my throat. Caleb flinched, but he didn't look away. Tell me about him, he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. I hesitated. Talking about Ethan to Caleb felt like a betrayal, but I owed him something. He's good, Caleb. He's kind. He helped me find myself again. Caleb nodded, his jaw tight. Does he make you happy? The question was a knife. Did Ethan make me happy? Yes. But it wasn't the same wild, reckless joy I'd felt with Caleb. It was quieter, safer. He does, I said finally. But it's different. Different how? Caleb's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, like he was bracing for the answer. I looked away, the autumn leaves blurring as my eyes stung. You were my first everything. My first love. My first heartbreak. Ethan, he's my second chance. Caleb's breath hitched, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The church doors opened behind us, and Ethan stepped out, his face a mask of calm I knew he didn't feel. Lucas, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We need to talk. I nodded, turning back to Caleb. Stay here, I said. Please. He gave a small nod, and I followed Ethan back inside, my heart pounding. The guests were murmuring, their eyes darting between us. Ethan led me to a small side room, closing the door behind us. Who is he? Lucas. Ethan asked, his voice low but urgent. You said your fiancé died. He did, I said, my voice shaking. I thought he did. The military told me he was gone. I had no reason to doubt it. Ethan's eyes searched mine, and I saw the hurt there, the fear. Do you still love him? The question hung between us, heavy and unavoidable. Did I still love Caleb? The answer was a tangled mess of memory and pain. I don't know, I admitted. I loved him with everything I had. But I love you too, Ethan. You're my life now. Ethan's face softened, but the tension didn't leave his shoulders. What do you want to do? I didn't have an answer. I wanted to rewind time, to unmake the choices that led us here. But I couldn't. I need time, I said. I need to understand what happened to him. Ethan nodded, his hand reaching for mine. I'll wait, he said. But not forever. The rest of the day was a blur. The wedding was postponed. The guests sent home with murmured apologies. Ethan went to his apartment, giving me space, while Caleb stayed at a motel in town. I went back to the farmhouse, alone, and sat on the porch where Caleb and I used to watch the stars. The weight of their love past and present pressed down on me, and I didn't know how to carry it. The next morning, I met Caleb at a diner on the edge of town. He looked out of place in his civilian clothes, like the world hadn't quite caught up to him. Over coffee, he told me about his Capturia mission gone wrong, a cell in the desert, 3 years of hoping he'd see me again. I listened, my heart breaking for what he'd endured, but I couldn't shake the anger. Why hadn't he found a way to tell me? Why had he let me grieve? I tried, he said, reading my thoughts. I wrote letters they never sent. I begged for a phone call. They wouldn't let me. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. And now? I asked, what do you want from me? Caleb leaned forward, his eyes intense. I want you, Lucas. I never stopped. The words were a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that he couldn't just come back and claim me. But part of Meth part that still dreamed of him wanted to run to him, to forget the last 3 years. I'm with Ethan now, I said, my voice barely steady. I can't just undo that. Caleb's face fell, but he nodded. I know. I just needed you to know I'm still here. And I still love you. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on Caleb's face. His words hung in the air, a confession I wasn't ready to hear. I pushed my coffee cup away, the bitter taste mirroring the turmoil inside me. I need time, I said finally, my voice hoarse. It's too much. Caleb nodded, his hands clasped tightly on the table. I'll be here, he said, as long as you need. I left the diner and drove aimlessly through Willow Creek, the town I'd grown up in, the town where Caleb and I had fallen in love. Every street held a memory of our first kiss behind the high school gym, late-night drives to the lake, the promise we'd made to build a life together. But those memories were ghosts now, and I was caught between them and the man waiting for me at home. Ethan was at the farmhouse when I got back, sitting on the porch with a book he wasn't reading. His dark hair fell into his eyes, and he brushed it away, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "How'd it go?" he asked, his voice careful. I sat beside him, the wood creaking under my weight. He told me about his capture. 3 years in a cell. Ethan. He didn't know if he'd make it out. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. That's unimaginable. But what does it mean for us? I looked at him, his steady gaze anchoring me. I don't know, I admitted. I love you. But seeing him, it's like part of me woke up again. Ethan's hand found mine, his touch warm and grounding. I can't compete with a ghost, Lucas. But I'm here, and I'm real. I need to know where we stand. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. But I need to figure this out. He nodded, his eyes glistening. Take your time. But don't shut me out. The next few days were a tightrope walk. I spent time with Caleb, trying to understand the man he'd become. He was different, harder, quieter, but still the Caleb I'd loved. We walked through the park where we'd spent so many evenings, and he told me stories of survival, of moments when he'd nearly given up. Each word drew me closer, but it also reminded me of the life I'd built without him. Ethan, meanwhile, gave me space but didn't pull away. He cooked dinner, left notes on the fridge, reminded me of the life we'd planned. One night, as we sat on the couch, he turned to me, his voice soft but firm. I'm not going to beg you to choose me, Lucas, but I need you to know I'd fight for you. His words broke something in me. I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder, and for a moment, I felt safe. But Caleb's face lingered in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. The town was buzzing with gossip. Willow Creek was small, and news of Caleb's return spread like wildfire. Old friends reached out, some offering support, others judgment. My mom, always the peacemaker, invited Caleb and Ethan to dinner, hoping to ease the tension. It was a disaster. Caleb and Ethan were polite, but the air crackled with unspoken rivalry. I barely ate. My stomach knotted with guilt. After dinner, Caleb pulled me aside. I'm not here to ruin your life, he said. If you're happy with him, I'll walk away. But I need to know you're sure. I'm not sure of anything, I snapped, frustration boiling over. You were gone, Caleb. I had to live without you. I know, he said, his voice breaking. And I'm sorry. The apology didn't fix anything. It only made the ache worse. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of indecision crushed me. Caleb stayed in town, renting a small apartment above the hardware store. Ethan moved back to his place, giving me space but checking in daily. I felt like a coward, unable to choose, unable to let either of them go. One afternoon, I found myself at the lake where Caleb and I used to swim. The water was still, reflecting the gray sky. I sat on the dock, replaying memories, Caleb's laugh as he splashed me, the way he'd pull me close under the stars. I'd been so sure of him, of us. But that was before the world tore us apart. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, meet me at the coffee shop. Need to talk. My heart sank. I drove to the shop, a cozy place with mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans. Ethan was at a corner table, his expression serious. I can't keep doing this, he said as I sat down. I love you, Lucas, but I can't be your second choice. You're not, I said, reaching for his hand. I don't know how to let him go. Ethan's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. You have to. For your sake, not just mine. He was right. but the thought of choosing felt like losing a piece of myself. I left the coffee shop and drove to Caleb's apartment, my hands shaking on the wheel. He answered the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "I can't keep you waiting," I said, stepping inside. "But I don't know how to do this." Caleb sat on the couch, gesturing for me to join him. "Tell me what you're feeling," he said. "All of it." So I did. I told him about the grief, the guilt, the love I still felt for him. I told him about Ethan, how he'd saved me when I was drowning. Caleb listened, his eyes never leaving mine. And when I finished, he took my hand. "I don't want to take your happiness," he said. "If he's what you need, I'll let you go." The words were a gift and a wound. I wanted to tell him I chose him, that we could pick up where we left off. But the truth was, I wasn't the same Lucas he'd left behind. And he wasn't the same Caleb. That night, I went home and wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since Caleb's death. I poured out my confusion, my love, my fear. The act of writing grounded me, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of clarity. The next day, I invited both Caleb and Ethan to the farmhouse. I needed them to hear me, to understand. They sat across from each other, tension thick in the air. I stood between them, my heart pounding. "I love you both," I said, my voice steady despite the ache. "But I can't live in the past, and I can't keep you both waiting. Caleb, you'll always be part of me. But Ethan, he's my future." Caleb's face crumpled, but he nodded. Ethan's eyes glistened, but he reached for my hand, his grip strong. I felt a weight lift, but it was replaced by a new one, grief for what I was letting go. The days after my decision were a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Caleb stayed in town, but we kept our distance, each meeting a quiet ache. Ethan and I started planning the wedding again, but the joy was tempered by the shadow of what had happened. One evening, Caleb called. "Can we meet?" he asked. "Just one last time." I agreed, and we met at the park, the same one where we'd shared so many memories. The air was cool, the stars bright overhead. Caleb looked tired, but there was a peace in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "I'm leaving Willow Creek," he said. "I've been offered a job in D.C., helping other vets. I think it's time for me to move on." My throat tightened. "I'm glad you're finding a path," I said. "You deserve it." He smiled. "A small, sad thing. You too, Lucas. I'll always love you, but I want you to be happy." We hugged, a long, fierce embrace that felt like a goodbye to more than just him. When he pulled away, I saw the boy I'd loved and the man he'd become, both slipping out of my life. Ethan was waiting at home, his presence a quiet anchor. We sat on the porch, the same one where I'd mourned Caleb, and talked about the future. For the first time, I felt ready to let go of the past. The wedding was rescheduled for spring, a small affair with just our closest friends and family. The church was decorated with wildflowers, and Ethan's smile was brighter than the sun. As we said our vows, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. But Caleb's shadow lingered. Not as a rival, but as a reminder of how fragile love is, how easily it can be torn apart. I carried that lesson with me, a quiet weight that made my love for Ethan deeper, more deliberate. Spring arrived, and with it, our wedding day. The church was alive with color, the air sweet with the scent of flowers. Ethan stood beside me, his hand steady in mine, and I felt a certainty I hadn't known in months. The ceremony was simple, our vows honest and raw. "I choose you, Ethan," I said, my voice clear. "Not because you're my second chance, but because you're my home." His eyes shone, and when he kissed me, the world fell away. The guests cheered, But all I saw was him, the man who'd loved me through my darkest days. Life after the wedding settled into a quiet rhythm. Ethan and I worked on the farmhouse, turning it into the home we'd dreamed of. We painted walls, planted a garden, built a life brick by brick. But Caleb's absence was a quiet ache, a reminder of the cost of moving forward. One day, a letter arrived from D.C. Caleb's handwriting was unmistakable, and my heart skipped as I opened it. He wrote about his new job, helping veterans navigate their trauma. He was finding purpose, he said, and he hoped I was too. At the end, he'd written, "I'm proud of you, Lucas. Be happy." I showed the letter to Ethan, and he read it in silence, his hand resting on mine. "He's a good man," Ethan said finally. "I'm glad he's finding his way." "So am I," I said, and I meant it. The months passed, and our life grew richer. Ethan started a small business, a bookstore in town, and I took up teaching at the local community college. We hosted dinners, laughed with friends, built a community that felt like family. But I never forgot Caleb, the boy who'd shaped me, the man who'd let me go. Years later, I found myself back at the lake, the place where so many memories lived. Ethan was with me, his hand in mine as we watched the sunset. The water was calm, reflecting the fiery sky, and I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. "Do you ever think about him?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not the way I used to. It's more gratitude. For what we had, for what it taught me." Ethan nodded, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "I'm glad he came back. Not because it was easy, but because it made us stronger." I smiled, leaning against him. "You're right. It did." Caleb's letters came less frequently, but each one was a small gift, a reminder that he was out there, living. He'd found love again, a quiet man who worked at the VA. He sounded happy, and that healed something in me. Our life in Willow Creek grew fuller. We adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Max, and started talking about kids. The farmhouse was alive with laughter, with love, with the kind of joy that comes from choosing each other every day. But I never forgot the lesson Caleb's return taught me. Love is not a single choice, but a series of them. Every day, I chose Ethan. Every day, I chose us. One evening, as Ethan and I sat on the porch, a package arrived. It was from Caleb, a small wooden box with a note tucked inside. "For your home," the note read. "A piece of me. For you." Inside was a carved star, like the ones we used to wish on. I held it, my throat tight, and Ethan's arms slipped around me. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice warm. We hung the star above the fireplace, a quiet reminder of the past that had shaped us. That night, as we lay in bed, Ethan's breath steady beside me, I thought about the journey that brought us here. The pain, the love, the choices that had torn me apart and put me back together. Caleb's return had been a storm, but it had cleared the air. It forced me to face my heart, to choose not just between two men, but between the past and the future. I chose Ethan, not because he was a replacement, but because he was my partner, my home. The star caught the moonlight, casting a soft glow across the room. I closed my eyes, grateful for the love I'd lost, the love I'd found, and the strength to choose both wisely and well.